Hello there everyone, your fluffy armchair Admiral Latter is back with some more hot ship action. In today's episode of Lots of Guns, series about Ultimate Admiral Dreadnoughts, we are going to talk about Grom class. It was a series of 2 destroyers built for Polish Navy by J. Samuel White of Coase. Both ships were commissioned in 1937. One of them was sunk during Second World War, and the other one managed to become the only Allied warship that took active part throughout whole World War II, and despite being badly damaged 3 times, only 5 sailors were killed and 48 were wounded throughout the entirety of that period, earning her nickname the Lucky Ship. It is also a first episode after release of Alpha 6. Update that focused mainly on destroyers. That's why, in next few episodes, I'm planning to cover history of some interesting ships of this type. It doesn't mean I will completely forget about other types, but this patch seems to be the perfect occasion to focus on destroyers a bit more than before. And it will be nice change from battleships that's been largely covered in this series so far. So don't be mad at me for covering mostly destroyers, for focusing on this type of warship. So let's now build our Grom class destroyer. But first, as always, we need to set up our battle. So the destroyers were built in a British shipyard, and hence why we are going to play as British. Ships also served with or along with Royal Navy, which you will find out about later. Anyway, let's set up our battle. It's gonna be year 1937 when the ships were actually commissioned. And we are going to set this battle at distance of 15,000 meters. It doesn't really matter that much. However, 15,000 meters seems to be an optimal distance for a destroyer battle. You will wait a little bit before destroyers will find each other. However, the battle itself should resolve quite quickly. There were 2 ships built in the series, so I am going to match up against 2 German destroyers, which pretty much Kriegsmarine happened to be a main enemy of those 2 destroyers. So let's have a look at how they eventually could do according to game standards, because obviously you will listen to the history of that ship later. So let's design this ship. And those were quite large destroyers. So we are going to use destroyer leader hull, which were introduced with Alpha 6, which we are using right about now. Let's set the parameters. So the before we set displacement, let's name our ship. So that's gonna be ORP Grom. There we go. Which was first ship of that series. And now let's set up the parameters. So displacement will be set at 2,700 tons. And the speed that those ships could actually reach was topped at 39 knots. Different sources give different values. I've heard about 41 knots. And probably for a short burst, those ships could actually reach speeds of around 40, 41, 42 knots. But when we are talking about standard top speed, I think, if I remember correctly, it was topped at 39 knots to make it safe for engines, because those have their own limits. You can always push the engines slightly above the limits, but it never ends well. The range of those ships, they were designed to operate in Baltic Sea, so definitely range was not designed to be too long. It wasn't that short, but it was definitely shorter than, for example, British destroyers range, or American destroyers. So definitely operational range was not part of design, or high operational range wasn't part of the design. When it comes to bulkheads, I will set them at standard. However, those were reinforced bulkheads, watertight compartment. I think there were 11 of such compartments inside that ship. However, don't get my word on it. I just couldn't find exact information about that, and I don't have access to all the books that I would normally do. But well, such times I need to limit my research to only internet research, which might not be exactly accurate. Anyway, ship used geared steam turbines, and it was fueled by oil. When it comes to boilers, I will use induced draft boilers, mostly induced. I might in fact use forced, because what we will see is that engine efficiency is not exactly sufficient with what I need to put on that ship to make it realistic. What else? Let's see. Auxiliary engine 3, because that's turbo electric drive, which was effectively used to power electrics on that ship. That was auxiliary engine. So, well, usually when main engines on destroyers are disabled, that auxiliary engine is not enough to cut it. But, well, it's all about scaling. I guess the game doesn't scale that too well. But anyway, we still have auxiliary engine. When it comes to propeller shaft, we will reinforce it a little bit. I'm not sure how this relates to reality, what that ship had, but definitely propeller shaft. There were 2 of them. I can't remember if they were reinforced or not, but well, definitely they weren't that bad. Anti-float 2, at least we could go even for 3. There were definitely pumps, and they were actually powered by that turbo electric drive, but that's not the only thing that was powered by it. Obviously it was all the system and electrics that were present on that ship, and there was quite a lot of that. Anyway, let's carry on. When it comes to propellant, ships used Swedish Bofors guns, at least when they were built. Later on they were refit to British standard guns. They were 4 inches, but that was during refit in 1941, I think, or 1940. So we will use corded 2 to make it easier for us. I don't remember what was exact propellant used for Bofors type ammunition, but according to the fact that ship was actually built in the UK, and UK was also one of the countries that bought Bofors guns for some time. In fact, then I believe they had more than enough ammunition to actually sell it, even though we were buying ammunition. Well, Polish Navy was buying ammunition from Sweden. Anyway, let's use corded, and let's cut this conversation short. When it comes to turret traverse, it was slightly supported by electrical system, and that is it, because the guns were loaded manually. There were electrical lifts, again, just to carry ammunition from the storages that were underneath the guns, but the guns were not equipped with barbettes. Those were just onboard mounted guns. So there were lifts, and sailors had to actually carry the shells from the lift to the actual gun mounting. There were temporary storages on each guns, so crews had some ammunition reserve. I think it was 45 shells per gun. but those were definitely not that much. Right, anyway, we got that set, and obviously ship had torpedoes. Those were 533 torpedoes. I think they could be extended to 550. Some sources mention that caliber. I don't exactly know how this worked. I think they were like originally 550, and they used some sort of adapters to reduce the torpedo size to 533. Anyway, we will use 21-inch torpedoes because those were quite popular. I don't want to go that far to use 22-inch torpedoes on a ship that might have used smaller ones. Right, when it comes to rangefinder, those destroyers happened to be the most powerful destroyers on the Baltic Sea, at least at the time when they were built, because, well, they were filled with absolutely modern technologies, and Polish Navy decided that instead of going for numbers, which they definitely didn't have money for, they went for quality, and they actually managed to order and co-design their ships so that they are cutting-edge technology. So definitely we are going for coincidence rangefinders. We are going to use at least sonar 2. I don't want to risk sonar 3, but sonar 2 is definitely well, sonar was definitely equipped on those ships. I'm not sure how this relates to in-game technology, so I will use sonar 2 just in case. When it comes to radio, those ships had radio direction finder since they were built. What they didn't have was radar. Radar was equipped in 1942. At least that's the first time when Generation First radar was actually equipped on those ships. When it comes to armor values, I couldn't find anything anywhere where you might look on the internet. There are no armor values at all. I can't believe that those ships had absolutely no armor, but that might have been integrated into the hull. So the hull might have been slightly thickened in various areas, which sounds logical. Ships definitely didn't have external armor plates, which was very typical for larger vessels like cruisers or battleships to have separate armor on top of a hull. So definitely those ships had only their own hulls. The thing is that this hull had certain thickness for certain reasons, and unfortunately I couldn't find those values. Anyway, when we got this part set up, it's now time to actually put some elements on top of that deck to make this ship actually look like Błyskawica or Grom, because those were two ships in that series. So we got a vast selection of towers, of just one. So we are going to use this tower, which doesn't look that bad compared to original one. It's not exactly the tower that was used in Grom class ships, but well, we have to use what we got. It's still better than it used to be. When it comes to secondary tower, we are going to use rear tower 6, which is the most accurate tower that I can use. And it's gonna go on the last slot, while the front tower will go on the front slot, or the first slot. There is also a barbette to be fit on a first slot, and that is pretty much the backbone of our ship. When it comes to funnel, we can use standard big funnel on a first funnel slot, and that's basically the mainframe of that ship completed. When it comes to armament, the ship had originally, when it was commissioned, she had 7 4.7-inch guns mounted in configuration as follows: a single 5-inch gun at the bow of the ship, followed by a double 5-inch gun in superfiring position. Also, another 4 5-inch guns mounted in 2 double mounts in superfiring position were present at the stern of the ship. And that is pretty much the main armament done. We are going to use additional 2 double 2-inch guns to represent anti-air guns that were also present on that ship. Those were, I think, 40 mils, and there were 2 gun mounts, one right behind the funnel, and the other one was supposed to be on superfiring barbette right in the middle of the ship. There were also 2 triple torpedo launchers, one pointing to the front and one pointing to the rear. We can now adjust the position of that middle AA gun. And that is pretty much our ORP Grom build. And it appears that we are now ready to begin the battle. Let's just quickly have a look at it from various and different perspectives to embrace the beauty of that ship. Okay, enough of that. Let's begin the battle. So, as always, let's talk about history of those ships for a moment. In 1924, the Polish government approved so-called Small Navy Expansion Program that envisaged introduction of 2 cruisers, 6 destroyers, 12 torpedo boats and 12 submarines. Unfortunately, country's economic situation wasn't good enough to fulfill this ambitious plan. Anyway, in 1926, the Department of Polish Navy managed to secure funds to build 2 destroyers. A year later, they were ordered in French shipyard, with first of them named ORP Wicher, or if you want to get a translated name, it's Gale, being commissioned in 1930, and second, ORP Burza, otherwise known as Storm, commissioned in 1932. They laid the foundations of a new class that Department of Polish Navy could order only in 1935, and began a new tradition of naming Polish destroyers after meteorological phenomena. New, greatly improved compared to Wicher class, destroyers were ordered at J. Samuel White Limited in Cowes, Great Britain. By the end of 1937, both destroyers, ORP Grom or Thunder and ORP Błyskawica or Lightning, were commissioned by Polish Navy. 2 more, even more improved ships of this class were planned. However, they were never finished because of the outbreak of the Second World War. After entering service, both ships became part of destroyer division, and for most part, crews were going through heavy and intensive training in order to make them fully combat ready. Grom became flagship of the division and was later replaced on that function by Błyskawica. Ships were also visiting Estonian and Latvian ports. On 30th August 1939, following very tense political situation between Third Reich and Polish government, and in order to protect the ships from being destroyed by Kriegsmarine in case of outbreak of war that seems to be imminent, Grom, Błyskawica and Burza were ordered to initiate Peking Plan. It included evacuation of Polish destroyers from Baltic Sea and joint forces with British Royal Navy. The ships raised the anchor at 2:15 p.m. and began their journey towards Port of Leith in Scotland. After midnight, ships reached Øresund. While passing through, ships encountered German cruiser Königsberg and a destroyer that was escorting it. But because war hadn't started yet, there was no combat. The ships then passed through Kattegat and Skagerrak. On 31st August, ships were spotted and followed by German reconnaissance planes. In order to trick them, Polish destroyers changed their course towards Norway and continued on their new route until nighttime, when they came back on course towards Scotland. Next morning, while sailing through North Sea, at 9:25 a.m., all ships received message about outbreak of war, which, according to packing plan order, gave them permission to engage in combat with German ships. At 12:58 p.m., they encountered HMS Wanderer and HMS Wallace and received liaison officer, and at 5:37 p.m. the same day, they docked at Leith port. Same night, after arriving at Scotland, ships were rebased to Rosyth, and as United Kingdom wasn't at war with Germany at that point, Polish ships were treated as they would be during courtesy visit. It has been only on 4th of September 1939, after United Kingdom officially declared war on Third Reich, that Commodore Roman Stankiewicz reported to British Admiralty readiness of Polish destroyers to begin joint operations with Royal Navy. During the early service with Royal Navy, ships were assigned to patrol and escort duties. During one of the first voyages, after lethal accident on board of Grom, it was discovered that Polish destroyers are too top-heavy to sail over Atlantic Ocean. They were ordered to go through refit to make them enough stable to survive rough Atlantic conditions. During refit, less important ballast were removed. Cage mast was removed and replaced with lighter one. Several lifeboats that were placed between superstructure and funnel were also removed, along with depth charge rails, and basically in total ship weight was reduced by over 56 tons. In November the same year, the Anglo-Polish Naval Agreement was signed. The Polish naval detachment, whilst under operational control of the British Admiralty, remained under command of Polish officers with Polish crews. Ships were also regarded as sovereign Polish territory, with all Polish regulations, uniforms and distinctions in place. In 1940, both ships took part in Norwegian campaign. During Battle of Narvik, they were initially patrolling nearby waters, providing cover for Royal Navy battleships. But later, every available ship was ordered to shell German positions and infrastructure in order to disrupt enemy operations and support troops fighting in that region. Polish destroyers were so successful in that role that they received various nicknames from German soldiers. Eventually, their hatred resulted in making Polish destroyers one of the priority targets for their artillery and Luftwaffe. In May 1940, Germans prepared an ambush for patrolling Allied ships. Their hidden artillery positions successfully shelled Polish destroyer Błyskawica, forcing her to retire from her patrol. She was replaced by Grom, who managed to destroy German artillery position and continued to harass enemy in that region. On 4th of May 1940, shortly after watch change on board of Grom, 2 German bombers were spotted. An order for evasive maneuvers was issued and crew prepared to repel enemy air attack. Shortly after, Another German bomber was spotted attacking from the other direction. It dropped 6 bombs, 2 of which made its way to target and struck Polish destroyer. Shortly after she sank, and she took lives of 59 sailors with her. Surviving crew was rescued by British ships and later transported back to England, where they've been redeployed to another ship. Błyskawica returned the next day and continued to support Allied operations in that region. 2 days after Grom was sunk, she managed to shoot down enemy aircraft. In mid-May, ship went through small repairs and was deployed to patrol and support Operation Dynamo. At the end of May, she was performing reconnaissance mission around Dunkirk along with British destroyer Vega. On 29th of May, both destroyers were chasing German U-60 U-boat. However, they failed to sink it. Shortly after, Błyskawica towed British destroyer HMS Greyhound that was hit by German torpedo. Later, Błyskawica was on convoy duties in Atlantic and Mediterranean theater. During night from 4 to 5th of May 1942, while undergoing service at Dockyard, Błyskawica supported air defense of Kos during German air raid. Her crew also aided and helped to rescue victims and put out the fires started by German bombers. Between 1942 and 1944, Błyskawica was mostly taking part in various convoy escort missions. In June 1944, she took part in Operation Overlord and later in Battle of Ushant, where she helped to defeat German destroyers. Later, she was used to supply weapons to French resistance. In November 1944, she returned to her normal convoy escort duties. And at the end of January 1945, while performing depth charge attack against German U-boat, her rudder was badly damaged, forcing her to go back to port for repairs. Because war at sea was much less intensive and because German army was about to be defeated anyway, repairs were extended, and by the time the ship was ready to get back to action, the war was over. She was then assigned a task to support Operation Deadlight, which's goal was to destroy surviving German U-boats. And after operation was finished, the crew of Błyskawica was officially disbanded by Admiralty that basically hoped to seize control over Polish destroyers. Polish flag was also taken down. However, even though ship was no longer in control of Polish crew, British flag was not raised. Eventually, after negotiations with British government, new Polish crew was assembled, and on 1st July 1947 at 3 p.m. Polish flag was once more raised on Błyskawica and she began her voyage back to Gdynia. After war, ship was modernized a few more times and continued to serve in Polish Navy. In 1967, a tragic accident in boiler room caused her propulsion to be badly damaged. Unfortunately, ship was so old and scale of required repairs was so large that it was not worth to perform such expensive operation. Ship was moved to anti-aircraft duties near shore of Świnoujście. Finally, in 1975, she was also rendered useless in her new task, and order to end her service was issued. 1 year after being removed from Navy list, she eventually came back and was once more commissioned into the Navy and replaced ORP Burza as a museum ship in Gdynia, where she remains until this day, making her the oldest existing destroyer in the world. You can find out how to visit her in the link down in the description of this video. And that's it for today's video. If you liked it, smash that thumbs up button. Don't forget to show your support by subscribing to my channel, and as a benefit for doing so, you will receive access to bell button that will keep you updated whenever I upload a new content on YouTube. Finally, don't forget to share your comments down below. Have a great day and see you all later. Later. Out.